Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to be upgrading another starter deck, the last starter deck. This is the final one. We're going to be upgrading the Learn from the Land deck. So we're going to clone it, and we are going to be upgrading this on a budget. We will be only using commons and uncommons. So this deck, it's an interesting one because when you're playing these decks against each other, this deck is by far the best deck, I think. But when upgrading on a budget, the major problem I have with this deck is, I'm just going to type lands, it'll probably show me most of the stuff I want to see. Most of the good stuff for this archetype, for these land decks, they're rare, right? We have like Lumra. Lumra's really cool. This whole Titania thing's pretty cool. Ren, awesome. Blossoming Tortoise. I have a deck with this in it that I play in ranked. Bonnie Paul. Lots of cool stuff for this archetype. As well as just, if you're ramping into big stuff, a lot of the cool big stuff, of course, is rare and mythic, naturally. Like, you get things like Silverback Elder, and you get the Overlord. Fantastic for this deck. Even the blue one, I think, is pretty good for this deck, personally. But with only commons and uncommons, there's not a lot of great payoffs for this, but we can definitely still make it a lot better. There's so much. Like, why is this in the deck? It's a sideboard card at best. I hate this Felling Blow card. There's a Bear Cub here, guys. It's a 2-mana 2/2. So we can definitely fix this. We can make it much more powerful. So let's start. I'm going to give myself some space over here so I can show you the cards I'm taking out, which is going to start with Mild-Mannered Librarian. This is in so many of the decks, and I just don't think it's very good. 1 mana 1/1. You can pay 4 to put a couple counters on it, draw a card. But, we're a ramp deck, so you can probably guess what I'm going for when I type Llanowar. Why isn't it showing now? Oh, right. Here we go. I got it. Llanowar Elves. You'll have one of these. But Llanowar Elves, right? I should put one. I should put that one. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Llanowar Elves. 1 mana, 1/1, tap for 1. This has been like the number one reason to play ramp for 30 years, or the main enabler for ramp for like 30 years. So 2 of those out, get Llanowar Elves in. And then Bear Cub. My god, why is this here? It's a 2 mana 2/2, no abilities. I mean, there's a million cards in standard that you can, let's just do 2 creature. And let's just see how many cards we can find. Oh look, this is just strictly better. Here's a 2 mana 2/3. It's harder to cast. Let's go to green. Green will have the good stuff. Bristly Bill. Do you want a 2 mana 2/2, or do you want a 2 mana 2/2 that gets counters and can double counters? Even if you're not a counter deck, it's just better. You could play this. It's got an extra power and tons of extra utility. You could be playing a 2 mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1. It's crazy that this ends. I get it because it's a grizzly bear. It's the foundation core set. I get it. It's classic, but you don't need to play it. This is a fun little nod to Magic history that you just don't want in your deck. Right. Druid of the Cow. Now this is fine. It's fine, but I prefer Dance. Why? I keep changing my filters. I want one of these. We're gonna be adding more. We're gonna be adding another one of these in a second. But 2 mana 1/3, fine. Can tap for mana. It's just a clunkier Llanowar Elves. I do like that it's a 1/3, so it can block against red aggro. That's pretty cool. But I do find it to be just kind of mid. This 2 mana, then you have to pay an extra 1, and you can search your library for a land, a basic land. So it does cost 1 more, but the benefit here is in the late game, you can pay 3, and you get an XX elemental where X is the number of lands you control. So if you can pay that, which it costs at minimum, if you don't get the basic land, it costs 5, so it's 5 mana 5/5. At worst, if you have the extra 1 to search for the basic, that means you have 6, and you're going to have 7 when it resolves, so it's a 6 mana 7/7 gets a land. And obviously with this deck, so much of it is getting lands for all this landfall stuff. This thing just gets huge. It's a big win condition in the late game. Very cool. I want to take out one of these, add one of those, and we will also be taking out, I think, my least favorite card in all of these decks. It's in so many of them. It's so... Okay, so here's the thing, right? 4 mana, make a copy of something. You're never going to want to do that with a small creature, right? You're never going to want to copy maybe a Mossborn Hydra's fine. But, you're never going to copy the small stuff. And then, if you're going to copy one of the big things, you could just play an extra copy of one of the big things, right? if you want to copy like a Rampaging Ballast, just play a second Rampaging Ballast, and then it's not as clunky because there's no guarantee that you have something in play when you cast this, and the kicker's cool, but I feel like if you're kicking this, you're probably already winning. It's kind of win more. So I'd rather just take this out, have a second Dance of the Tumbleweeds, because this is the whole point of the deck, is to ramp into big stuff. And speaking of payoffs, Tatiova by far is the best payoff, and I want to take out 2 of these Centuries for it. So this is a 4 mana 4/4 reach. This is a 5 mana 3/3 without reach, which sounds worse, but the benefit is whenever we play a land, or actually whenever a land enters, that's going to be very relevant. It will count for stuff like this, for example. We get to gain 1 life and draw, and this is huge. This deck produces so much mana, and we need to draw cards. It's very important that we draw cards. It's why I'm not going to be taking this out. This sort of stuff is so important. This is also kind of a clunky draw spell for this deck. Doesn't matter. It's staying in because we want to draw cards. We will gas out. We will spend our entire hand building up our mana and then just be out of cards. So card draw is very important for this sort of ramp deck, and this is our best payoff for a landfall because we just draw more and more cards every single turn. Definitely worth taking out 2 of these for 2 of these. It's a legendary, by the way. That's fine because this is a kill on sight type of card. Our opponent should be doing everything they can to kill this thing. If they aren't, then we're fine with that. We're just going to win. If we draw extra copies, that's fine. Once we have 5 mana, we basically always want to have a Tatiova in play. Next, I want to take out these Big Fin Bouncers. This card's okay. It's a 4 mana 3/2. It bounces a creature. It's actually kind of a cool tempo card. The problem is this isn't really a tempo deck. This type of card wants to be in a deck that is constantly developing its creatures every turn and then is trying to control the opponent at the same time. In this deck, a common problem with it, I mean, you can tell just by looking at this. What do you see? You see nothing going on early, right? We're just developing our mana early, and we need to get to this stuff. And we have this giant chasm of just not much going on in the like 2 to 4 drop range. And that can cause us to get overwhelmed. And we have a pretty cool solution to that in standard right now. And that is Etherize, which is being played in some of these ramp and landfall type of decks. It is 4 mana. Return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. So what happens with this, like if you're against red aggro, is they go super wide, they're pressuring, and then you bounce their entire board, and sometimes it takes a turn or 2 for them to get stuff back on the battlefield, at which point we're getting up into this stuff, which is where we want to be. So we're losing the 3/2, that's fine. It's worth it to bounce our opponent's entire board. So next, I still want more lands, and we have a really cool card that I don't think people, like, I haven't seen people talk about it much, but it's kind of cool. We have Harrow in standard. Did you guys know we have Harrow in standard? So this is a 3 mana 1/1. Wow, that is bad. But when it enters, you can sacrifice a land, and if you do, you search for 2 basics. Now they do enter tapped, so maybe it's not quite as good as Harrow, but this is basically like Harrow that makes a 1/1, right? That's sort of what it does. The reason this is so good is that is 2 landfall triggers. So if we had Tatiova in play, for example, we would draw 2, gain 2. If we had a Rampaging Ballast, that's 2 4/4s. Because we only go up 1 land, right? We sacrifice 1, get 2. So we only go up 1 mana, which is still good. We're still ramping. But it's 2 landfall triggers. This makes 2 1/1s when we do this, right? So it's actually pretty cool. This is a sideboard card. You put this in your sideboard and you bring it in. It's also another tempo card. We have like these weird tempo cards in our ramp deck. But you put this in the sideboard and it's a flyer. 3 mana, 2 powers, fine. It destroys stuff every single time it deals combat damage, which is crazy if the opponent doesn't have answers. You put this in your sideboard in best of 3. Not really a main board card, I don't think. So we'll take 2 of these out, put 2 of these in. And now you'll notice we don't have a lot going on low, but we're going to ramp very consistently up to this stuff very fast. And I also want to take this card out. So I hate it. No, I'm not going to justify it. I hate this card. I don't like removal that is contingent on having a creature in play unless my entire deck is creatures. We have seen in the past green stompy decks. Literally, they play lands and creatures, and they'll play like 2 to 4 spells total. Not different spells, like 2 to 4 spells total, and it'll be like a fight spell. And we saw that with like M19 Stompy. You also see it with like white aggro decks and Pioneer, where like the only spell they'll play is like a protection spell. Right, that's fine. But I mean, look how many, we have so many spells And this thing it sits in your hand and you don't have creatures, and I hate it. I just don't want it. Out 3 of these, because this is really good in this deck with all the landfall stuff. I also think you should take out probably the Thornwood Falls for a land that sacrifices. There's a bunch of them. Fabled Passage, Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Escape Tunnel. This is the best one. It's just strictly better than Evolving Wilds. It's Evolving Wilds with a extra ability. The reason we want these, let me just put it down here. The reason we want these is because it is 2 landfall triggers. So this, it enters, we gain 1, and then it can tap for either color. This sacrifices the turn it comes into play, and it gets a basic and it puts it into play tapped. Now that is technically worse, because once we choose a color, that's the only color this land produces, but they both enter tapped. The upside is this is 2 landfall triggers. So if we top deck this with a Rampaging Ballast in play, it makes 2 4/4s, because we play it, we get the landfall trigger, we sacrifice it, we get the land, we get the landfall trigger, right? So Fabled Passage would be my my preferred land, because after you have 3 lands, it enters untapped. But on a budget in our 0 rare build, it's going to be Escape Tunnel or Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds, whatever. And that's our deck. Our deck is going to do one thing very consistently, that is ramp. We have Llanowar Elves, we have Bushwhack, we have Druid, this ramps, all of this gets us mana so we can get up into this landfall stuff super quick. That is our entire deck. We're going to be bad against red aggro. We're going to be pretty good against like mid-range type of decks, and it's definitely better than where we started. But rares you might want to add. There's a very obvious one that I talked about before that is very important for this deck. This card is incredible. 3 mana. This probably goes in the place of Spring Bloom Druid, to be honest. But it's 3 mana if you're not casting it. It makes a land. The land can tap for any color. And then once you have 5 mana, you can just cast it, and it's going to make that land. And it's a 6/5. And then every single time it attacks, it makes a land. It is so good. I would rather have this over the Druid. There is also for free. Everyone has this because it's in one of the other decks. I should fix this, by the way. Let me fix this so this is normal. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. Bunny Paw. It's a 6 mana, 6/5. When it enters, you make an Ox. The Ox has power and toughness equal to your land count. And whenever you attack, you get to draw, and then you can put a land into play. A 6 mana, 6/5 that makes a 6/6 at least by itself is fine. And then the extra draw is pretty good. Note that the attack is whenever you attack, not when Bonnie Paul attacks. So you can play this, get the Ox, then attack with something else to draw. There is also potentially you could play Vorinclex. It's a 5 mana 6/6. When it enters, you search your library for 2 forests, and then you can exile it and you get all kinds of stuff. You can mill 10, get 2 things back, you distribute 7 counters. It's also got Trample and Reach on a 5 mana 6/6. Probably, once again, better than like Hero's Bane and the Elf's Horn thingy. There's also, if you get like more of these landfall things, like if you want to go with the Ballots and Primeval Bounty, Awaken the Woods is really interesting. So it's an X and 2. It makes X/1/1 tokens, but they are lands. They are token land creatures, meaning they do trigger landfall. So this with a Tatiova in play, it basically draws X, right? If you paid 7 for this, you'd make 5 1/1s, then you would draw 5, gain 5, right? That's pretty cool. You could also play stuff like Silverback. This is a 5 mana 5/7. When a creature enters, you can destroy something. This is better than the Trigun Predator thing. You can look at the top 5 and get a land put onto the battlefield so it ramps, and you gain 4 life. Once again, would much rather have this over Hero's Bane. Hero's Bane's cool. It gets huge, but it doesn't have trample. And this, every single time you play a creature, you can go find a land or gain a life or destroy stuff. And it's a 5 mana 5/7. Would rather have that over the Hero's Bane personally. And another fun one, I don't even know where you would put this in, but Genesis Wave is interesting. You reveal the top X cards. You can put any number of permanent cards. That does include lands from among them with mana value X or less. I don't think I'd want more than like 1 or 2 copies, but it's clunky though. It is clunky. Very, very clunky, but fun looking. But yeah, Like I said at the beginning of this video, this deck was hard to upgrade, man. It's hard just because there's not a lot of common and uncommon payoffs. You'll notice that we didn't add any new payoffs. We're using the same payoffs. We just upgraded the ramp, right? We added Llanowar Elf. We added Dance of the, which is a payoff, but we added this. We added more ramp here. We added a way to stabilize and stave off aggro decks. But a lot of our payoffs are the same because there's just not a lot of good payoffs in commons and uncommons other than Tadiova. And there's the other Tadiova too, which it's a 3-mana 3/3 whenever a land enters. If you have 7 or more lands, you can make one of them a 3/3 with haste and flying, because it gives lands you control flying. If you're on a budget and you're looking for another payoff, I would say 1 or 2 copies at most. It's not the type of card I would want 3 or 4 copies, I don't think. But I can see this going in the place of, again, I keep pointing to this card. It's cool, but is it as good as making 3/3 flyers? I'm not so sure. My point is, we don't have a lot of great payoffs for landfall and ramp. Oh, no, I do want to talk about the 7/7. What's it called? Oh no. Hang on. Power equals 7. CMC equals 6. Type equals good creature. Bam. There it is. I know all the stats, not the name. This card, on a budget, 2 mana, you discard it to search for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, doesn't ramp you, goes into hand, gain 3. But in the late game, 6 mana 7/7, reach, ward. That's a pretty good stat line. I could see this also going in the place of Druid of the Cow. We lose the blocker, which could be relevant, but we gain 3 life, which might be all that this saves us anyway. And then when we top deck it late, we just play it as a 7/7. Also very good. I could see 3 of these coming out, 3 of these going in. I'd be totally okay with that. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. That is, learn from the land. Hopefully that's useful, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.